Hey guys, Dustin Nguyen.
Hey, this is Scott Snyder.
This is Paul Dini.
And you're listening to Bat Force Radio.
And you're listening to Bat Force Radio.
You're listening to Bat Force Radio.
This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman, and you're listening to Bat Force Radio, so stay tuned.
Welcome back to Bat Force Radio, our first episode, our first new recording of 2023. So happy new year, and thank you for joining us for another year. We've got a lot of cool stuff coming up this year, so stick around for that. Tonight, we've got Grandpa Batman in Texas.
Howdy.
And I'm Robin Cross in Canada. And our first guest of the year is an author of the top-selling single-issue comic of 2021 with House of Slaughter #1, as well as books like Barbalien, Red Planet, The Oddly Pedestrian Life of Christopher Chaos, another one of my favorites, Behold Behemoth. And really, when there's an author who's being tapped by James Tynion and Jeff Lemire to write books set in the universes of Something's Killing the Children and Black Hammer, you should probably pay attention to what it is they're putting out. This week, he returns to House of Slaughter with issue 11 for his second story arc and the return of Jace Boucher. Welcome to the show, Tate Brombal.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate you taking the time out. Yeah, we were just saying you've got you're spinning a lot of plates right now with the work that you're doing on House of Slaughter again. Behold Behemoth is ridiculously good. And I don't know, are you currently working on other stuff like Christopher Chaos still going? Are you doing any other Black Hammer?
Yeah, so right now, I've got Behold Behemoth, which is, we're slowly wrapping up our first story arc, and the hope is that there will be more. But the first book will be 5 issues. And Nick is working on that, on the art. I've got House of Slaughter. I'm back with issue 11, and I'm doing until 15 for my second arc on that book. And then Christopher Chaos the plan is that it will be like a long-running book. So I'm just always kind of working on that. The first book, the first volume will be 6 issues, where I think 3 issues are released, so we're halfway through the first volume. So I'm working on that, and then as soon as I wrap the first volume, I'm going to just keep working on it. And then for Black Hammer, nothing new. I talk to Jeff all the time, and we always kind of throw ideas around. But right now, what was on his Substack last year, which was Colonel Weird and Little Andromeda, which was serialized through his Substack, will be coming to print this year. So people were waiting for that. You can grab it.
And Christopher Chaos at this point is still just digital, right?
Yeah, so the plan is, it's coming
I think
through
June?
Dark Horse in June. The first issue will drop,
Yeah, so I've read the first issue digitally, but I'm waiting for those physical releases to continue.
Me too. It will feel even more real, and I love the characters. I love what we're doing so much, so I cannot wait for more people to get their eyes on it, but also just hold it in my hands.
Yeah, and it looks so good too.
You know, when you've worked so long on a project or a book, and then you actually get to hold it in your hand. I mean, what's that like?
Yeah, it's very surreal, especially books that are very feel very intangible, like Christopher Chaos and Colonel Weird and Little Andromeda, which I wrote so long ago, over a year ago, and then it was serialized across 2022. So just to finally get that in my hands will be very cool. I think a lot of people have that feeling where it doesn't feel real until it's actually in your hands, or you see it on a bookshelf or in stores. So that it's very hard to put into words, but it just feels real, and it's the best feeling basically.
Yeah, I get that. In my former life, I was a musician, and with internet changed the business and the platform for how it was distributed and just the whole model. And I can just remember the first time I got, this is dating me, but a copy of my first CD in my hand, and I was just like, whoa. Versus now everything's put out digitally, and I can only imagine musicians now are just like, it's just not tangible until you touch it.
Yeah. Well, there is, I think there's a reason like the record business is booming again. Like people are buying records again.
Oh, I just buy vinyl now. That's all I buy.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like actually holding it and then like having it on a shelf to like just have as like in like a physical collection, like it changes it and it makes it more tangible. So I think that's important, and why especially like physical comics like sales are through the roof, especially when the pandemic first hit. Everyone like rushed to stores to like mass buy books, even though most of them would be available like on their iPad or something. People like no one like I think will always just want to have that physical thing.
I can't read digital. I mean, one or two. I mean, we sometimes get preview copies just to, especially when we're going to talk with creators and stuff like that. And I'll glance at it and stuff like that. But it's not the same. I like to hold it, smell it, and
yeah. That's like even when I'm doing final edits and I have like I'm scrolling through a PDF on my computer.
Right.
Like I know that it's gonna hit different when I actually have the comic in my hand. So like even doing edits on a PDF, I find like it takes me out of the actual reading experience.
Right.
So that's something I do actually struggle with, but it's okay.
I want to get into your own origin story. So, what was that first thing that got you either into comics or just into writing in general? What made you say that this is what I want to write?
Yeah, I've always written, like especially and when I couldn't write, I would like I was really close to my grandmother, and like I grew up with living with my grandparents. So like she loved books, I loved books. I would like read voraciously. So even when I couldn't actually write, like we were always telling stories, and she would write them and draw pictures of the characters. And then throughout elementary school and onward, like I loved English class and creative writing, and all of my teachers were like super supportive and like kind of they knew I loved writing and whatever I was writing, even though I was in grade 2 or 3. They were like, this, like he clearly like loves doing this, and he like his like stories he's saying, like even at that point they were just enjoying them. So my parents and like teachers were super supportive. So I always loved writing and wanted to write. I didn't know if I could actually do that as a job as I got older. Like as a kid, you just write, like I was just writing for fun. And then in terms of comics, I've like always I loved novels. Like I read novels as a kid, onward. Then I remember my brother did like a contest at a library and won like 100, like a stack of 100 Archie Digest comics. So then I was just like, there were so many Archie comics in my house. So then I just started reading them, and like I loved reading Archie. And then I moved on to, I think from there I moved on to Jeff Smith's Bone, which I would get like monthly through the Scholastic orders. And I loved Bone. And then from there I was reading, it kind of just, I think Bone was really where I was like, wow, like something was connecting with me in comics, like much deeper than anything else. And Bone is just incredible. So then from there, the first wave of Marvel movies like that, like Spider-Man and X-Men were coming out at the perfect time for me. And I'm like revealing my age, but I was like very young.
You're young
like,
as hell.
so Spider-Man and X-Men and like stuff were coming out, and I was like a kid, just like, this is amazing. And so then I was like, where are the comics? I was one of the kids. I was like, where are the comics to like read more of this stuff? And I remember going on the Marvel website and looking to find like what X-Men comic would be right for me. And at the time, it was Kyle and Yost's new X-Men coming out, Academy X.
Mhm.
So I was like, I started buying their comic, like the new X-Men comics. Started buying Uncanny X-Men, which was like Brubaker at the time. And then Mike Carey on the Ejectiveless X-Men. So like that was like my first like Marvel comics I was buying. And then from there, I just started reading everything I could. And like I would order like my chapters Indigo order online, which is like the Barnes and Noble of Canada. Yeah. And then I would like rush to get my books, my comics for that month. So I've loved comics ever since then. And then I didn't think I could do that as a job. So I wasn't actually planning on getting into writing comics.
So how did that second part start? How did you eventually find yourself in the industry?
Well, I went to school and I moved to Toronto. I studied for like film and TV production. Because I was like, I don't know how to write books. I don't know how to get in, like, I don't think I could like write. And there was no clear way to get into comics, making comics. So I was like, well, there is a path for like movie and TV, and I want to do something creative. So I did that and specialized in like writing for TV. And then I had to have, in my final year, I had an internship with a producer in Toronto, and she had the rights and was adapting Essex County for the CBC here in Canada. So then I didn't even know that when I got the internship, and I found out that she was developing it and that they were going to be holding a writer's room while I was interning for her. And I was like, please let me get into this writer's room. Like, I love Essex County. I love Jeff Lemire. I'll take on more work. Like, I wasn't being paid, but I was like, I'll do whatever. She's like, okay, you'll handle our lunches and our coffees, and you'll take notes for the room. Like, it was like one of those jobs. So like I took on that extra work just so I could like be in this writer's room. I didn't even know if Jeff would be there, but I was like, this graphic novel is just incredible. Like, I need to be involved. And then at some point in the writer's room, like day 2 or 3, they were like, Jeff's coming to stop by. And I was like, immediately like crapped my pants. I'm like, just like freaking out. And then I remember like going down into the lobby, and I remember like seeing him enter. And then I like hid, and I was like, I don't know what to say to him. I can't talk to him. I was like, just broke out into a sweat. And then
Jeff will hide from you as much as you'll hide from him.
I know, actually, that's like what's funny, because we are very similar. So then when I had to get back into the writer's room where he was, because I had a job to do, I of course ended up sitting beside him, and then we just started talking. As like my final year practicum, I worked with like a group, and we made a film that went back and forth between film and comic, cool. Which was like very cool. So I was talking to him about that. He obviously saw that I love comics, and then he just talked about his experience, and we hit it off really well. We just became like friends. And then after that, we kind of kept in contact. He needed like sometimes we need like odds and ends like jobs. So I kind of became like an unofficial assistant for him. Nice. And I remember always telling him like, it's so hard to get into TV. Like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. And he's like, if you love comics so much, like, why don't you just write comics? And I was like, I can do that. Like, I hadn't really thought of trying to do that.
For the club.
No, I was waiting for that invitation. So then he was the one that like pushed me and was like, start working up ideas. I would throw like scripts at him. I would talk him through like story ideas I had. And then because I was assisting him a bit, especially for his image books, he didn't really have like a formal, well, he had an editor, but like he would kind of throw scripts through me to like kind of do a copy pass. So then I was reading all of his scripts, and like I kind of learned how to write comics from reading his scripts, and then also him giving feedback on, like, I wrote scripts that will like never see the day. I wrote like pitches that will never see the day, but he was always like kind of helping me through that. And that went on for like, I want to say 2 years, a year and a half. And then I don't know how many years ago it was, but I remember it was February. He asked me if I wanted to do the encyclopedia for Black Hammer, which was just like writing the like entries for them, for all his characters. I was like, yeah, like I'll take that job. That's so cool. So that was my first actual thing published. And then at some point, like how my first gig was Barbalien Red Planet, which he basically, how it happened was he did like a Twitter poll and was like, what characters should get a mini series next? And then I like chose Barbalien, even though I think he like got like last. But then I DM'd him, and no one else do this. Like me and Chef have a relationship. We are friends. So like I DM'd him like a pitch, and I was like, what would be cool is if you did a Barbalien comic. He was active in the 80s. If it was during the AIDS crisis, he's a cop, like a queer cop during the AIDS crisis. He's this shape-shifting Martian. I gave him like this pitch for what this book could be, and he was like, interesting, I'll think about it. So then I didn't really hear from him for a bit, and then he randomly called me again and was like, you're writing this Barbalien Red Planet comic. Like I was just giving him the idea. I didn't expect to write it. So then he called me and was like, you're gonna write this, and Gabriel Walta is gonna draw it. And I was like, what? Like Gabriel Walta. So then he basically took like a huge chance. Like he kind of knew what I was capable of. I don't think anything I wrote was good, but he like fully just like trusted me with this book, which is like I feel like very blessed and privileged for, because like so many people do not get that opportunity. So then that pressure also made me be like, this needs to be good, because I can't let Jeff down. In any case, it's going to be beautiful because Gabriel Walta is drawing it, Jordi Belair is coloring it, and Aditya Bidikar is doing the letters. So it's going to be beautiful. Yeah, I didn't want to let Jeff down. And then because it's an AIDS crisis story, I was like, I can't let this community down. So like all this pressure kind of forced me to make sure it was good. So I'm very blessed from that. But anyways, that's the long-winded story of how I got into comics.
Very cool. Very good. It's funny. Most of the writers that we talk to, that was not their intended career path. Most of them. I mean, it's always cool to hear how that career path develops. You may have wanted to start this one, but your natural, love of comics eventually pulls you into that. It's just cool to hear.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, no worries. It's an industry that is like hard. If you're outside of it, it feels impenetrable. And it is for like a lot of people, because there isn't a clear path. Like if you're trying to get into film or TV, there is like a path. Like it's a long path, but it's like pretty easy to get PA gigs. Like just start PAing, build a resume, do like even short films. Like you might not even be paid well, but as the more gigs you like get into, you can kind of work up this ladder. As soon as you're on sets, you network. There's so many people involved in film and TV. So then you kind of, there is like a set ladder. And then if you meet someone, there's great mentor-mentee relationships in film and TV. So like, but comics doesn't really have that, which is why it feels like a struggle to get into.
So like everyone got into comics a different way.
Yeah, which is cool.
So I know that a lot of people that are going to be watching / listening to this are here to listen to you talk about House of Slaughter. But I want to get first into, because it's excellent, I want to go first into Behold Behemoth.
Cool.
So if you don't mind, for anyone who is not already reading Behold Behemoth, we're only a couple issues in, so people aren't necessarily clued into that a book exists, before it gets to like issue 3 or 5 or 20.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to tell people what Behold Behemoth is all about? Yeah.
So I'll give like a spoiler-free version, and I'll especially talk about like the influences. But basically, it's about a social worker named Grayson, or Gray, whose brother has mysteriously passed away. And there's this mystery of how did his brother pass away. And Gray is having a terrible day. It's an awful day, leaving his brother's funeral. And at the same time, he's been having these nightmares of a monster and like a freakish future that looks like the end of the world. And one thing spirals into another, and you realize that what he is having nightmares of, this monster, may actually be what's causing the end of the world. So it's a lot. It's heavily influenced by the past 3 years, and kind of a lot of the things I've been feeling, a lot of things we've been going through, and it's kind of all been put into this comic book, which is like it goes across many genres. It's post-apocalyptic, but it's also like psycho horror. It's a drama. It kind of becomes I don't know what the subgenre is called, but if you know Sweet Tooth, if you know The Last of Us, where there's like a hard-boiled man and like a young little girl, it's one of those.
Don't you dare bring up Last of Us with me.
Right? Oh my God, tomorrow, the premiere.
I know.
So it's kind of all of those things and influences put into one book, drawn and colored fully, digitally painted by Nick Robles, who's like incredible. If you're looking at these pages,
yeah,
it's just so beautiful.
Such a great looking book.
Me and Nick have become good friends, and I basically was like, I'm going to make this book for you more than anyone, just to show off what you're capable of. And
it's not just the art either. Yeah, the books look fantastic, but I remember messaging you just before book 1 came out. So it's like the Fridays before issues come out is when Boom sends out the PDFs for review.
Right.
So I remember reading the first issue of this, and like I was always going to check this book out because you were writing it. And then I read the first issue, and in particular, there's that conversation between the two mains. Again, I won't say too much for people who haven't read, but she's hiding under the sink, and they have that moment together, and that was a really strong moment of the first issue that really made me realize that it was going to be something.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's definitely, if you know, most of my stuff really like has its heart on its sleeve. So there's some emotional bits. There is gonna be some like humor and funny bits, but it's a pretty dark story. But then it's also like it's just very sweet because it's this relationship between this older guy who's kind of at the end of his rope and this little girl who could be like the future. So it's got a lot going on, but it's starting at 5 issues. Is kind of like how the industry is working right now. But like the hope is like there'll be like a volume 2, volume 3, and we'll see.
Yeah, and I see what you mean, like the humor between them, because there are particularly when they're in that other world, the relationship between them, I can definitely see the beats there where it's very much like a Joel and Ellie kind of situation.
Well, she's just a kid. She's like 10 years old, and she likes fart jokes. She likes to be silly. She wants to have fun, and then he's just this overprotective grump. So it's a fun dynamic.
So you give, or what's your writing style? I mean, do you write full script for Nick, or do you just kind of give him the beats and then fill in the dialogue afterwards? Or
no, I do like full scripts, like pretty detailed scripts, and then me and Nick talk every day, which is why like the first issue, like you can like fully see just like our synthesis, because like everything bleeds together really beautifully, and I don't think it would have worked if we weren't so close, because he'd like send layouts, and then I would volley back more ideas like, well, what if we did this to help integrate or like get this effect across. So the first issue, like I'm so proud of it. It reads like a fever dream / an anxiety attack, which is like what we wanted, just like this spiral. And I do not think it would have worked unless if we hadn't been working so closely together. So I do full scripts, and then he does layouts off of that, and then we do like a full like hour to 2 hours sometimes call, going page by page, seeing like what we can push further, or like how we can, like, I'm never afraid of like ignoring what my script says and kind of like honing in on what he's feeling or what will get whatever across better. So that's like, it's really cool. It's probably the most fruitful relationship I've had like so far in comics. So I'm loving working with him, and I know this will just be like our first book together, because we have plans for many more books.
That's cool when, you know, a writer and a artist kind of have that synergy and they actually become a team where, you know, there's not really a difference between writer and artist. It's kind of like we're the creators of this, right? This is our baby. So,
yeah. And like
cool.
Working with him, I'm like, I know this would not, a lot of the things would not work, or like wouldn't work as I envisioned them if it wasn't with Nick.
Yeah.
And with this book, Nick was like, I think he was kind of feeling worn out, or just like wasn't sure of his place in comics. And he was actually at a point where he was like uncertain if he was going to stay in comics or like have a future in comics. And I was like, please just do this book with me, and we'll see. And then like this book like brought him back. Like, so that I'm thankful for this book, because it means like Nick is still in this industry, because he's so talented.
Yeah.
So I'm very thankful for that.
And for anyone who's going to check it out after hearing about it, next week is issue 3.
Mm-hmm.
So there's book 3 here.
And issue 3 is when we get our first big chunk of lore. So people have been like, what is going on? Because we're not really holding your hand so far through this book. But issue 3, there's a good chunk of lore. We got a lot of things explained, and some fun post-apocalyptic monster battles, which is cool.
Is that the genre you like most, like the horror?
I like the way, like, I kind of have fallen into horror. Like, I didn't think I would be writing horror, and then House of Slaughter happened, and like, even though my first volume, like, it had some scary bits, but like, it wasn't full horror. I've really like fallen in love with the genre.
Like movies you watch, or is that the kind of the genre?
Yeah, well, yeah, I do love horror movies. So, so my second volume, though, I pushed the horror for sure, because now I'm just like all in. I'm very excited for people to see it.
So yeah, I was going to mention that book 3 of Behold Behemoth is out next week, with a cover by Werther Dell'Edera, who is, along with James Tynion, one of the creators of one of the biggest comics of the last few years, Something is Killing the Children. Now, how did you come into working on House of Slaughter?
Right. So basically, Barbalien was coming out, and then James had read it, James was reading it, and he loved it, and I think he included it on his like end of year, like best of 2021 list that he was sending out through a Substack. So he was reading it. And then the editor of Something is Killing Children, Eric, was also reading it separately from him and really liking it. Eric reached out to me and was like, let's find a book to do together, because I think you're talented, and I want to do like a creator owned with you. So then Eric was trying to work with me. James was loving Barbalien. And then behind the scenes, they were talking about House of Slaughter, and they were wondering like who they could bring in. And then I guess they both realized they were both talking to me, and they were like, oh, Tate could write this. So then that's basically why that happened. They both love Barbalien, and then realized they wanted the first volume to be like a romance, like with, like, the only prompt I had was Aaron. It was a prequel for Aaron to talk about like his story, and James wanted it to be like have some romance plot in it. So they were like, Tate just did Barbalien, which was like this queer history, which had a good like romance plot through it as well. So then they reached out to me. I was like, yes, please. It was like my first offer since Barbalien came out. So I jumped at it. And then Eric was also still like, I still want to do an original for you, but let's focus on House of Slaughter now. And then that original would become Behold Behemoth. So then for House of Slaughter, they gave me that like pitch for what the first volume could be, and then I kind of ran away and came up with all these other ideas, which became the first volume basically.
And introduced everyone to Jace, who is now taking center stage in this next arc.
Yeah, I love this character. It's funny because when James gave me the prompt, he was like, maybe Aaron has a crush on a white mask, and there can be like that rivalry aspect. And I was like, yeah, he's going to be a white mask, but he's also going to be a transfer student. And there's now a second house in the States. So I was like, I came up with that, and James was like, oh, cool. Yeah, there can be a Southern house. What if we call it like La Maison de Boucher and like the butcher shop? So then I just started coming up with that. And then I was like, what if Jace is a legacy hunter? Because why not? What if there's hunters that are like, are born into being a hunter, and like their parents were hunters, their grandparents were hunters. So then I made Jace this legacy hunter. And then the character just kind of really took on a life of his own. And there's just, as soon as you introduce like a legacy, like there's a history there that's really fascinating. So I'm glad like characters, I mean, readers really loved him, because then now there's another volume that's just going to focus on him, which is very cool.
Yeah, so very much we found out in the first volume that Jace was really out for revenge. And now he has severed himself from his own house, from the order overall, I mean. And now he is he's back in Louisiana, I believe, and is taking care of this group of orphaned children that he has grown.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is I didn't know that I'd be coming back for a second volume. And I didn't know that Jace's story would continue. So when I thought my like House of Slaughter issue 5 would be my last issue, and possibly the last time we'd see Jace. So I left Jace at like a kind of dead end, which was, oh yeah, he's collected like this whole campsite full of orphan children. And then, spoiler, Aaron has just cut off his hand. And Aaron has also said, you can't hunt. You need to hide and stay low so that the order doesn't find you and kill you. So that was that sounded like a story dead end. So like, we want more Jace stories. I'm like, well, I left him there to like be in stasis so that if James, you ever wanted to bring him to the main title, you could. So then I was like, how do I get him out of this stasis? Which is what this book, which this volume became about. I'm like, hey, he's left with these orphans. Clearly he needs to avoid hunting. He can't be found. What could go wrong? And basically what could go wrong is he's back in Louisiana. He hasn't been to the butcher shop since he was a kid. And what happens when one of his kids runs away and is found by the butcher shop is what this volume becomes about.
And a fun part. So Gramps is just starting to dip his toes into the whole Something's Killing Children universe. So I'm going to risk spoiling a few things for him here, but
it's okay. I'll forget it in 3 hours. My memory's
what are you talking about?
Okay, let me just set that up. Okay, so today I was shopping for some G.I. Joe figures on Target. Okay, and I was like, wow, those are really cool. I almost bought them. Within the hour, they were delivered on my doorstep. I forgot that I'd ordered them months ago. so
there we
go.
Pull
away. I'll forget it. It doesn't matter.
Nice.
So yeah, the one part that stood out to me, and we're not going to put this episode out until the day of release. So you can go ahead and say anything that you want. We'll put this out the day issue 11 hits shelves. But yeah, the one thing that I noticed was one of the totems. So Jace has the 2 totems who are supplying information to him about what's going on, and he asks them how Aaron's doing. Mm-hmm. And the one totem, I think was it Aaron's totem? I think.
Yeah.
Just flat out lies to him. And it's like, Aaron,
he's
fine.
great.
Yeah. hunky dory.
Yeah. I'm having I didn't expect it, and I actually forgot about the totems, and then I was like, oh yeah, I got to bring these totems into this somehow. And now I'm having so much fun writing the totems because they don't like each other, and they're hiding information, so they're fun to write.
Yeah, they're a really cool aspect of the story that I didn't always expect to be that. You know, we got Octo in the beginning of Something's Killing Children, and then seeing how his relationship began to change with Erica as things were going on. And then, you know, we meet Aaron's, and then we meet Jace's, and then throughout in the second volume of House of Slaughter, that sort of went to like a different dimension of what they could be. You know, like Edwin, I think was his name. His totem wasn't even a stuffed animal. Yeah, it's his paintbrush.
Yeah.
Which is just, you know, like, oh yeah, of course it could be that. But yeah, now in this volume of House of Slaughter, we're seeing not even a deviant. Like I don't feel like it was a malicious lie to Jace. It was more protecting him from the truth that he was not currently equipped to deal with.
Yeah, that's a nice version of it. It's not malicious. He wants what's best. This horrible monster trapped in a totem wants what's best for James. It could be that. Who knows? We'll see.
For as long as it's what's best for him. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, no, it's very fun being back for this volume, and I get to show off the butcher shop, which is probably like what I'm most excited for. And this, you'll meet her in this issue 11, which is Jolie Boucher. And she is my favorite character now, as you will come to see. And I just want to write her forever. So
yeah, she's already, I'm already on board with her. She's on the cover of, I think, issue 12. And she's got two different colored eyes. And
oh man, because as soon as I realized, I'm like, you guys haven't done like mismatched eyes yet. So I was like, I'm stealing that idea, and Jolie is getting them. So
and it's a great idea to do, because the hunters in this whole universe, that's pretty much what you're seeing of them is their eyes. You know, when they're masked, it's all you see.
And now there's so many hunters now with green eyes, purple eyes, whatever. I'm like, Jolie's going to be the only one with mismatched eyes, and so I'm proud of her. I love her.
How do you? I always have a question, or just curious, how you basically create a character and develop their personalities and traits and stuff like that. I mean, because you're the same person, but you've got to write all these different characters. What's your process in understanding and differentiating all the different people?
Yeah, well, honestly, a lot of them start from just like an archetype, like just like almost like one-dimensional. Like I'll be like Jolie, when I first come up with her, I'm like, she's gonna be like a classic Southern belle. And then as like the more I write them and the more I develop them on the page, and as especially as the story demands, because the character is always in service of the story. So even if I'm like, I thought this character was this way, but I'm like, no, for like the story to work even better, like what if this character does this or becomes this? So she started as just like a Southern belle, and because she's like a monster hunter, I knew like a Southern belle that is creepy and malicious and kills things and likes to save and collect children. It's just like that's a scary.
Have you ever been to Louisiana?
No.
You just described 90% of the people there.
Amazing. Perfect.
Nailed
it. So
no offense, people, but
so she started just as like a one-dimensional thing, and then the more I wrote her, and especially I just delivered the final draft of issue 14, which is like where you really get to know her. You just build in layers, and like you kind of go back to like whatever Like her, we have like a flashback in issue 11 of when her and Jace first meet, and then you see her now. And obviously a lot of things have happened, but going back through her history, like why she is the way she is, and how we can kind of pull that up in the present. They just develop kind of on their own, brick by brick. Like,
do you ever have those
like
moments?
Jace was that way too.
Do you ever have those moments when you're just like walking around in the grocery store and be like, you know what? I think they would say something like this, or
yeah,
something like, you know.
Yeah, all the time. I'll get like random dialogue bits will come to mind. I'm like, oh yeah, that's better. Or like, now I need to find a scene just for that one piece of dialogue to come out.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be fun to watch her grow into herself the way we have already seen Jace, because you know he came into the story as one thing, and now we're seeing a completely different side of him.
Yeah, and I think that's also going to be like a major tension this volume, where at the end of volume 1, he was like, I've given up on my revenge. I'm happier. I'm at peace. Like I'm not going to be that like angry, rage-filled Hunter x Hunter anymore. And he seemingly flipped a new leaf, or turned a new leaf. So this volume is also going to be like, has he really? And like, is that old Jace still there? And like, how much of it is a front? And like, what's gonna happen when the story demands like that old Jace to come back?
Yeah.
So yeah, so I don't want to spoil anything, but I'm excited for all that.
So you've been writing now for a while in two different, so you're writing in these worlds that exist also outside of the books that you're writing yourself. You know, you're writing in the Slaughterverse, you're writing in the Hammerverse. Yeah. So how much participation is there between you when you're working in this stuff? How much time do you spend working with Jeff and with James regarding what you're doing, or did you sort of have is it your own stomping ground to do your story, or do you have to work with them? Like, how much are you working with them to make sure that you're staying within the scope?
Well, like basically how it worked for both of those was I went to both Jeff and to James for their respective books, and I had the story already worked out, what I wanted to do, like pretty much like a full beginning to end. And then I pitched it to them. They offered ideas or feedback, or like, what if you did this instead? For Barbalien, because it was like truly my first, like Barbalien issue number 1 was my first comic like going to print. Like for that series, I went to Jeff and we did like a very rough outline of like each issue, like what it could look like. I think the first like 2 issues of Barbalien really stayed true to that, and then the ending became completely different. But like just having that structure was like very helpful, especially for Barbalien, because I was like, it was my first gig. And then for House of Slaughter, I gave James like a breakdown of what I wanted to do. I pitched him on the idea of Jace being a transfer student from another house. And then I also pitched him on the idea that he was a legacy hunter. And then I pitched him on the idea that he carried around the totems of his family, and that he was going to unleash the monsters and the totems on the house, which was like another thing. So like for House of Slaughter, I was actually surprised how much they let me just do what I wanted to do. Like I came up with issue 2 of House of Slaughter, is his totem ritual where he releases the monster and then needs to put it back into the totem.
Yeah.
I was like, I want to do this because it would be cool, and it needs to set up like him unleashing the monsters later. They're like, yeah, cool. That's like, that can be a new ritual that they do. So it's like, it's in the book, it's in the lore now. Nice. So like they like truly let me do so much, and like I'm very surprised by it. So I had a lot of fun doing that, and then basically they would read the scripts, and then I think both of them, issue 1 had like the most feedback, like this character voice is a bit off, or like this scene, maybe you do this. And then after that, it was like pretty minimal notes. It was mostly just notes from like editors, but they would read each issue that I wrote, and then so they knew what was going on. And if I was doing anything that was like that's wrong or that's not going to work, then they would tell me. But that never happened, which was cool.
What's it like while you're working on these characters? Like, you know, you're writing Jace's voice, you know, you're writing Aaron's voice, and knowing that these characters could be showing up on Netflix
I know,
in the
weird.
future.
I try not to think about it because I don't want to get my hopes up. Like, I'm from the TV and film world, so like I know of anything being made. Like, so many things are optioned, and then the chances of something actually being made is like pretty slim. Like, I'm not saying like something's going to on Netflix. I'm pretty sure it's like, well, it's still into development, so I'm not saying anything about that. But I'm always just cautious, and like I don't let myself get my hopes up. But it is very cool, especially when they announced that it was being adapted, because I had already signed on for House of Slaughter, and then that was announced, and I was like, this is ridiculous. This is very cool. So the idea that they can show up is awesome. I hope I can be involved even a little bit, even if it's like just for like if Jace has ever shown up, like please let me get. Well, I'll be fighting to get back into that writer's room like I was all those years ago.
Right now, gun to your head, if you could choose someone who is going to play Jace on Netflix,
oh man, no,
who you got?
There was someone who I'm terrible at names, so I will not be able to do this. I'm sorry, but
what was the? Is there something?
I'm trying to remember. No, I'm completely blanking. I think it was like there was a show I was watching like a year or two ago. There is someone out there who can do this, obviously, and he was in a recent thing, and he'll be perfect. I just don't remember.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah, that guy.
I know exactly who you're talking about. He's great.
Yeah. There was like Chris Sheehan who drew the first volume.
Yeah.
He pitched that. Is his name Rahul Kohli? That's like person, right? He was in Rahul Kohli, who did like Midnight Mass. He was in iZombie, Haunting of Bly Manor. He's this Indian actor who we were like, he could like, he's getting a bit old now, but he would have been like a fun Aaron.
Okay. Let's see, I'm gonna bring up a picture of him here.
Oh my gosh, me and Chris also just have a big celeb crush on him, so we would just love that.
And Chris is awesome too. We had Chris on here a while back.
Oh, nice. Yeah, he's so sweet. I love Chris.
And let's see. Did that download?
Have you done or do you attend any Comic-Cons?
This is the first, like 2022 was the first year I could kind of get into it because Barbalien debuted during like the first wave of COVID. So like I debuted during the pandemic, so I couldn't really do conventions. And then so this will be like the first year. Yeah, there he is. He would do a good Aaron. So but now this year, 2023, I'll be doing some. I'm gonna be at GalaxyCon Richmond in March. I think it's March. That's for sure planned. I'll probably be at San Diego and New York Comic Con, and we'll see what else. And I'll do all the Toronto shows if anyone's in Toronto.
Yeah, I was at Fan Expo, and I was passing by the booth, you know, where James and Werther and Martin and everyone and Alvaro were all set up. Not when I was there, getting, you know, making James sign stuff and chatting with him and all the guys. But later on, it was like the next day or something. I saw you sitting at the table there, but there were a bunch of people. You know, there's a big line at the time, and I didn't have any of my House of Slaughter books anymore because I thought I was done with all that. So then I remember
I was
that
unofficial.
I messaged you after and said, "Hey, are you gonna be back you know at later today or back tomorrow or anything?" But I don't think you ended up being back. So
Hey, piece of advice: if
This year.
you're at a Comic-Con and someone steals a book off your table, Robin is the guy that can track them down. He's the world's greatest detective at a con.
Good to know.
It's a very specific talent, but yeah, it came into play when someone, whether it was on purpose or by accident, had swiped a book from Libre Mayo.
Oh my gosh.
And Lee messaged me and said, "Hey," and then 10 minutes later, I had recovered the book somehow.
Wasn't he also wearing a Bat Force shirt?
Yeah, that was
Oh,
that was why Lee messaged me. He said, so he messaged, asked, "Hey, when you get a minute, can you come over to my table?" So I went over there, and he said, "Yeah, so I'm not accusing you of anything, but do you know anyone here that might be walking around in one of your shirts?" I said, "Well, I've seen a few shirts around here, but I don't know. I'm not here with anyone wearing one." And he explained the situation. This guy that was wearing one of our shirts had bought some prints and made off with he had the gallery edition of Damned. It was right before Damned came out, a month before. So there was that version of it that DC had printed that had no text in it. There were no speech bubbles, anything. It was just Lee's art. And he had brought his copy to show people over the weekend, and that had been taken. Yeah, luckily, he just wanted to know if maybe I knew who this might be. I had no idea, and I told him, let me see if I can find it. He said, no, man, no. There's like 1 million people here. This place is huge. You're never gonna find it. Don't worry. But 10 minutes later, I had walked the guy back to Lee's booth. I felt like like I was a teacher walking a kid to the principal's office.
Nice. In his defense, he didn't know. He thought it was a free sample, but
wow.
Yeah,
really nice free sample.
Yeah.
Someone joked, I think it was Tom, one of our other guys, joked later that I had paid the guy $20 to do that, to orchestrate the situation. I said, no, all I had to pay him was a Bat Force shirt.
It was an inside job.
So this is another thing that I want to get to. It's up to you if you want to talk about this or not. Completely cool if you don't. But I wanted to, given the subject matter of some of the books that you've written between Barbalien and House of Slaughter, the changing voice of not only creators in comics, but of characters and stories in comics, and because of that, largely because of that, the changing demographic of readers with there are so many now queer creators telling stories of many times queer characters, and how much more inviting that must be for queer readers to come out and want to read these stories and find how welcoming a comic shop can be for them, where they may have not expected so before. I work in a comic shop here, and over the past several years, you've been able to see the demographics change. Whereas it used to be very much like a white male's 20 to 45 kind of clubhouse. Not through anyone's specific intent, but that was just what it had been for a long time. And more recently, you can see the difference in not only genders, but orientation and race, and it's great for everyone. How much that has expanded it. It's great for creators. It's great for the stories that can be told. It's great for the people who can feel invited to comics, and all of that means it's great for the comic book industry. So how has all of that been for you, making your way through this? Did you ever feel any resistance? Do you feel like any of that has changed? Do you feel like it's still changing?
Well, I had, like I said, a very privileged entry into comics. I came into it as like with Jeff Lemire over my shoulder, and then I jumped to James Tynion over my shoulder. So it was like
on the shoulders of giants.
So I just never, I never got pushback. And I was very surprised, especially with Barbalien. Well, actually, also House of Slaughter, because I didn't even script the scene in issue 4 when when Jason and Aaron just get they take all their clothes off in the woods and they get down and dirty. I just scripted a kiss, and Chris was like, "We're going all the way." I was like, "Okay."
Yeah,
and
that sounds like Chris.
I thought for sure, like our editor Eric would be like, "Okay, guys, like, reel it back." Like,
well, dude, with Chris drawing it, you're lucky that we didn't see penetration.
I know, actually. So that was like, I thought there'd be a pushback, but Eric was like, I remember like keyboard smashing in the replies when I saw it. And then I was like, Eric, can we even get away with this? And Eric replied, saying, "We got to give the people what they want." And I was like, okay, perfect. So
it's brave storytelling to not only put things like that in there, but there's, what is it, issue 2 or 3 where it's the cover is like a full cover shot of maybe 4 of Aaron and Jace making out like on a mainstream comic cover that I don't think 10-20 years ago you would have seen that happen. You know, the world has changed. There's a ton of change that still needs to happen, but I think a lot of change is already happening.
Yeah, it helps. Like, there's a lot of things that needed to happen for that to happen. Like behind the scenes, like having an editor like Eric who was supportive and like wanted these things was like game changing. The fact that it came out of like a massive series like Somebody's Killing Children, like where you can take risks. House of Slaughter, the fact that like the biggest selling comic of that year was like basically a gay romance monster hunting book was ridiculous.
Which is, a very common genre to visit.
Yeah, right. So,
gay romance monster hunting.
So there were a lot of things that lined up, and then doing it was very special, especially that cover where it's like that's on the stands. But then I was reminded very quickly a very sad reality. I think it was on Twitter. I saw it was like a younger kid, hopefully old enough to be reading it, but he said, "I really want to buy this comic, but I can't have it at home or my parents will see it." Because he obviously was not out to his parents. So then he was like, "I really want to read this issue, but I can't pick up this comic. Like, I can't buy this and bring it home." And that was like a very, like, just a reminder of like, even though we are doing these things, like the world, like this is still happening. Where like this kid who wants this representation, wants to read this story, has this fear to like own it and bring it home. So that's like the flip side of it, which is like always important. That doesn't mean like we don't do this, but it's just like I offered the kid like I'll mail you a variant cover. But I think he was able to like find one, which was good. So it is very cool, and I'm very blessed. I was surprised with how much they let me get away with in Barbalien as well, because that was like a very angry comic. Because if you know anything about the AIDS crisis, the relations between like the police at that time with just queer people was very fraught, especially with all the rioting surrounding AIDS, people dying of AIDS, just being neglected and just being left to die, basically. So I got a lot of angry things off my chest in that comic, and I was surprised that Dark Horse let me do that. But again, I had like, it was coming out of Black Hammer, which was like one of the biggest independent superhero universes to like happen in a while. And I had Jeff like support, so that meant the world as well. So I feel very privileged, and then with that privilege, I'm like, what can I do, and how can I use this to actually like do some good, or like get that representation out, but also just tell good stories. Because I think like we're getting to a point where like finally, after like getting crumbs of queer stories, and sometimes either like very high, like now especially like highly commercialized queer stories where it's like this optimistic, like sunshine and rainbows, where like more of the focus is on the representation, which is great. But then I also really want like the story, like how, like I really want like the story to be just as good as like so many like straight stories across so many centuries have been able to like develop and like have this beautiful thematic resonance, have like these super deep layered characters with all these flaws, and actually talk about like very human, important things. So that's why I'm like, I want to do this representation, but the story needs to be good, and it needs to, like, that just matters very much to me.
And with I think one of the important things that is, maybe we might be getting to that point now, is, you know, we've seen characters like, you know, Tim Drake be revealed to be queer, Jonathan Kent revealed to be queer, and I think that you know, between that and the number of queer creators that there are in comics now, we're almost getting to the point where it's no longer news. You know, like we're getting to the point where the stories will still get the attention, and the narrative won't be kind of hijacked by the fact that, oh, this is a queer character, oh, this book's from a queer creator. It's not going to matter anymore, and people will be able to just focus on, you know, we won't have any more of, oh, I heard the character in this book is queer. Oh, is the book good? Oh, I don't know. I just heard that the character was, you know, we're going to get past that because enough of it is going to be there.
Which you're already seeing it with, because I know like past year Betsy Braddock came out with Rachel, right? I think, but like that, and I don't, maybe I was just out of touch, but when she came out, there wasn't like, obviously she's a smaller character as Captain Britain, but I don't remember there being like massive waves of like the way that like, well, Superman is huge, but like Tim or John Kent got, so like I think you are starting to see where it's like not as big of upset, which is like ideal, because it's just, and so many of these characters like Rachel and Betsy or like Bobby Drake have been written like closeted for decades. Like Bobby Drake for years was written as closeted. And it just like took like an actual story for him to come out. So it is cool to see, and it makes me very happy. And I think the biggest thing is we are seeing changes behind the scenes with editors, and then the talent. And it's just like, you need to be hiring the people behind the scenes. It's not like the representation on the page is great, but what matters more is that we're hiring these people from marginalized groups to like finally have a voice and like share their stories and just tell good stories.
And and that as it changes from behind the scenes, and that affects what is being told in the stories, and that is affecting, you know, who is feeling invited into comics, you know, like that feeling like comics are for them. You know, everything is leading to another thing. Like I mentioned, the different demographics that we see coming into the shop now. You know, and it doesn't just stop at people of different races or, you know, different orientations coming in. We have people who opened, you know, began shopping with us, opened up a file as a male, and, you know, now a few years later are female. You know, so seeing that happen, and the people who now feel like, you know, a comic shop is a place for them, because I feel like for a long time it didn't feel welcoming. You know, there weren't stories being told for that, and, you know, maybe they were seeing the wrong people online talking about comics. You know, there are too many people, I think, who have been online for years, you know, had loud voices that, you know, maybe grew up reading or watching X-Men on cartoons and maybe didn't understand X-Men. you know, because they were a little too closed-minded towards towards different lifestyles.
Yeah, and again, obviously, the more people you get in the shop, the better the industry is gonna do.
Yeah.
So telling these stories for more people is so important. And right now, like, comics is doing better than ever, especially with kids and like young readers. So like that's now a generation reading Dogman, and like Randy Telgemeyer's books. They're going to be that's a growing generation that we need to pick up, and we need to have books ready for them that they're going to want to read. So that's all super important stuff.
And as far as, you know, sticking with the kinds of stories being told, you mentioned earlier that you didn't expect yourself to be writing horror, but in comics right now, there is so much great horror that's coming out. What do you think it is about this current time that horror is not only so popular, but there's so much good stuff coming out?
Beyond like the obvious, because the world is falling apart, and it's just like horror gives us this catharsis. I think that is like the biggest part of it. I think it's also because I think comics fell out of horror for a bit, like when Vertigo kind of stopped doing that. We just didn't, I don't know if we forgot about it or like forgot how effective it could be. But then having, I don't know what started it. Obviously James led so much of it, but I think like Jeff and Andrea's Gideon Falls reminded people. Like that first issue of Gideon Falls with the priest at the end of his bed still freaks me out so much.
And yeah, now they're also doing Dark Ride.
Now they're doing their whole horror universe. So I think there's a power to horror in comics, because so much of comics, like books, even though there's no, obviously the great thing in film is you have the audio cues and like the creepy music to like really pull you into horror. Comics and novels, so much of it is like you filling in the gaps with your imagination. So like there's so much more work involved with your brain. So like you get called into the story more, that when horror in comics hits right, it's terrifying. It's so freaky. So I think we were reminded of that. So seeing so many great horror comics come out to show like what the medium can do is awesome.
And I didn't mean to say Dark Ride there. I don't know why that one was just on my mind. That's
I knew it,
Josh,
the
but
Bone Orchard.
all the Bone Orchard stuff. Yeah, that whole universe. 10,000 Black Feathers just wrapped, but yeah, Dark Ride is great too, and Jeff and Dustin are doing Little Monsters as well. And there's just, it seems most of the books, like, and like every publisher has horror stuff that they're doing. Like Ablaze has Boogeyman, that's really good too, and there's all this stuff. Nice House on the Lake, you know, that was essentially
James
horror.
James is killing it. In June, well, it's already online, but The Oddly Pedestrian Life of Christopher Chaos is us doing horror, but from, like, I say it's my my shadow, like, X-Men book that I'm secretly writing the X-Men, but it's all horror. it's all horror monsters.
if one of the X-Men is a reconstituted pigeon.
That Christopher Chaos is basically taking classic, like all the classic horror monsters, like Frankenstein's in it. I'm sure eventually Dracula show up, but it's like a new generation of monsters, and it's written. It's like, it's not afraid to get bloody. It swears. So I guess the vibe. It's James always says he wants to write comics that are the ones that like kids read and hide from their parents, or like are secretly reading at school. So it is meant for like a younger audience, but anyone can read it. It's like that age range of like Invincible, which is just like good addictive comics. So it's gonna be that there will be horror, but like with anything I write, it's like so much about the characters. Like it's gonna have lots of heartfelt moments. It's gonna be a good story in there. So that comes to print in June, and we'll just drop that.
From Dark Horse.
from Dark Horse. So, and I just did like a full read through of like Hellboy, and I'm gonna be doing like I'm going through BPRD, and I really want to read the Witchfinder series, but that's gonna be like heavily influential on this series. We're calling ourselves like Hellboy's kid brother. So I'm very excited for this book to launch. So
yeah, that's very cool. A big Mignola influence.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a photo of Mike Mignola smelling my Canadian money.
Nice. Oh, I forgot our money smells like maple. I haven't smelled it in a while.
Yeah, I was at San Diego, and I think it was Mike's wife, maybe. Yeah, I think it was Mike's wife. Maybe she picked up that I was Canadian from my voice, and I forget how it came up, but one of us mentioned, I think she asked if our money really did smell. So I pulled out, I was in America, so I had mostly American money at the time, but I did still have some Canadian on me. So I pulled out, because it's I think it's the strongest one. I pulled out 100 and rubbed it against itself, and handed it to her, and she smelled it and goes, "It really does smell like maple syrup."
Wow.
And then I had like this moment where she was handing it to Mike to smell it, and it was like happening in slow motion, and my brain thought, Mike Mignola is gonna smell the money, and I got my phone out and I opened the camera really quick, just in time to get a picture of him smelling it.
Nice.
American money smells like strippers and cocaine. That's crazy.
Well, that's why we put the maple smell in it.
Yeah. The 5s, 10s, and 20s don't smell like anything because they get passed around so much. So it's got to be the 50s and up.
Wow.
But we will let you get on with your life, get out of here. We do appreciate you taking the time to be here and talk about the things you're doing. So January 18th, House of Slaughter 11, Return of Jace. Then January 25th is issue 3 of Behold Behemoth. And then we're going to wait after that for the physical release of Christopher Chaos.
Yeah. And then that's everything that you are aware of, which is exciting. There will be some other, I don't know when it will be announced, but something big is coming. Beyond that, Colonel Weird and Little Andromeda is coming out as well in, I think, March or April. Which is cute. It's like a bunch of short comics done with incredible artists, where I wrote comics for Andreas Sorrentino and Danny, Marguerite Sauvage. Yeah. Anyways, just a crazy, very cool artist I got to work with on that. Thank you for having me. Thank you for promoting my.
Absolutely. We love putting out there the stuff that we love reading.
You want to do a lightning round?
Yeah, you want to hit them a lightning round?
So lightning rounds. We've already talked about comics and all that stuff, but let's get to know Tate.
Okay.
Think of this as laying down on the couch. You have to tell us the first answer immediately in your mind.
Okay.
Favorite X-Men?
Oh no. For some reason, Rogue came to mind, and I don't think it's Rogue, but I'm very bad at decisions.
Wolverine, but okay, no.
It's
Rogue.
not. I do love Wolverine, but
all right. What's your favorite Nickelback song?
Rogue. Oh my god.
Who has a favorite Nickelback song?
Look at this photograph, just for the meme.
Okay. What's your go-to energy drink?
I guess Red Bull, 0 sugar.
Is that one because we were just talking about Monster before we were on here?
Yeah. What's your favorite candy bar or snack, junk food?
Oh, I can eat so many chocolate-covered almonds, and I get sick. Like, I will actually get sick, but like I cannot stop eating them.
Gotta feel better so I can eat more.
Have you ever killed a bear?
No.
Oh. Okay.
I love bears. I would never.
Good answer. I hate
Give
those
them a hug.
trophy hunter people.
Oh man, I went camping this past summer, and there were bears outside my tent, and it was terrifying. So I do not advise going anywhere near bears.
What's your favorite movie?
What, Pan's Labyrinth is one of them.
Oh, I just
cool.
rewatched that recently.
Wait, I have this guy. A little fawn. This is my only action figure.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's the fawn from Pan's Labyrinth.
You know, they make an old fawn too.
Really? What?
Yeah, they have the regular fawn and old fawn.
Oh, cool.
So they have pretty much that whole. They have
I need to get the.
They have
The
pretty
eye
much
monster guy.
all the characters. Yeah, they've got the dude with the hands and all that. All right. Well, let's see what else we got.
I like asking this one. This could be comics related or not. What is the best advice you've ever been given, and who gave it to you?
Oh my gosh, the best advice I got, which is very weird. In grade 10, my art class, we had to do a portrait, a self-portrait. And I'm like a perfectionist, so I go on and on and on. I spent hours working on this portrait, and I kept bringing it back to my art teacher. And I was going like very lightly because I was kind of like scared of doing like very dark black because I couldn't erase it. And he kept pushing me, being like, you need to make the blacks as black as you can go so that the whites, like the light parts, pop more. And then the grays will even have more of a gradient. And every time I'd come back, he's like, just go even blacker, go dark, go dark. And still, for some reason, that just like that, which was about like a pencil self-portrait, has like stuck with me, like even my writing, where I'm like, whenever I'm like, guess if I'm pushing something far enough, or if something's literally getting like too dark or heavy, this like advice comes back to me where like you need to like push things in this direction so that these other parts pop even more. You need to go dark so like the happy moments like really hit you even harder. So for some reason, this visual and this advice that has nothing to do with writing or stories, like is one of like the pieces of advice that keep coming back to me, which is cool.
That's very cool.
Very cool.
And you know, related to your career and your creativity, you have to push yourself to the point where you feel like you're gonna, you're uncomfortable to be at that point where something exciting is going to happen.
Right. Yeah, and that's part of it too, where like I was like holding back, and he was like, "You can't hold back. Like you need to like kind of push it as far as you can." So that was like a great learning moment, which I don't even think I realized, but for some reason, all these years later, it's like stuck with me. Which is nice.
Yeah, make Aaron and Jace get it on in the woods.
Right. You gotta push it. Push the limits.
Then have a bear kill him.
Oh, already pooped.
All right, what's your dream car? If you win the lottery tonight, what are you buying?
Oh, you live in Toronto. Do you even drive a car?
No, and you're also asking a gay man who knows nothing about cars. I like maybe a Rolls Royce if it's a luxury car.
Ah, cool. I'll be your driver.
Charles Xavier had a Rolls Royce, and God loves, man kills.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I, as a kid, I was like, "That's a cool car." So that's the only
shave
one.
my head and roll around in that.
Yeah.
All right, that's all I got for lightning round.
Cool, man. Well, we will, I guess, let you off the hook there. Get you out of here back to real life. Again, we appreciate it. Tell people where to find you online.
Yeah, it's just my name at Tate Brombal across like Twitter, Instagram. I think that's mostly just what I use. Yeah.
Yeah, you're blessed with a great name.
All my books.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
You're,
I was like
blessed
worried
with a great name for social media. You
Yeah,
don't have to put a
Okay.
31 at the end of your name.
No, there are multiple Tate Brombals, which doesn't
Liar.
make sense to me. There's one girl who kept messaging me on Snapchat, being like, "Give me your now you know my Snap." I don't even know if that's my Snapchat. But anyways, she was like, "Give me your username because my name's Tate Brombal." I'm like, "What? How are you real?" So there are multiple Tate Brombals out there, which is very weird.
Doppelgangers.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, so go find Tate on whatever social media you use. Check out all of the books we just spoke at length about and the ones that we didn't. But again, thanks so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening. That was Tate Brombal. This was Bat Force Radio. We will see you next time.